Hello children, have a nice day to all of you. Today we are going to talk about the topic called coordination. Normally, when think about the coordination of body functions, there are two systems it needs. First one is central nervous system and the other one is endocrine system. Normally, coordination connects stimulus with a response to link the different activities in the body. So, first we will look at what is the central nervous system. In central nervous system, impulses travel along the neuron are not like an electrical current, but it's sent from one nerve cell to another with movement charged particles in and out of the membrane. That we call as the neurotransmitters. When think about the neurons which relates to the central nervous system, there are three types of neurons like sensory neuron, motor neuron and the relay neuron. When think about the function of those neurons, sensory neurons cause to pass along the impulses from receptor to central nervous system, or we call it as CNS. In motor neurons, it transmits impulses from central nervous system to effector, which is called muscles and glands. When think about the structure of the typical neuron, in a neuron there are main parts included are, as you can see in the picture, cell body, nucleus, dendrons and dendrites, and axon, myelin sheath, Ranvier node, Schwann cell, and also nerve endings or terminal buttons. Those are the parts in a typical nerve cell or a neuron. In a neuron, the cell body has finer cytoplasmic extensions called dendrons. These in turn form finer extensions called dendrites. Normally, the junctions can be made with other neurons on any part of cell body, dendrons or dendrites. So these junctions we called as synapses. Also, when think about the dendrons in a nerve cell, one of the extension of dendron is much longer than the other dendrons. So we call these as axon. Normally, axon divides into many nerve endings at the end furthest from the cell body. Normally what happens here is the signals from nerve impulses are transmitted across the neuromuscular junction. So what happens here is it causes to contract the muscles and the fibers. And also in the neuron, the axon has an outer covering or sheath made of a fatty material called myelin. This myelin sheath insulates the axon, preventing a short circuits with other axons. And also it causes to speeds up the conduction of the impulses. Then we will move to the differences between sensory and the motor neurons. When think about the motor neuron, it has a shorter dendron, while sensory neuron, it has a longer dendron. In motor neuron, one of these dendron is become much longer than the other dendrons and it has produced larger axon. So, motor neuron, it has a long axon, while the sensory neuron, it has shorter axon. So when think about the cell body, in the sensory neuron, cell body is located on side branch of the fiber, but in motor neuron, cell body is located at the end of the fiber or the axon. So when think about the transmission of impulses, normally impulses are transmitted in the sensory neuron, impulses are transmitted to the central nervous system, which is called brain and the spinal cord. But in motor neuron, impulses are transmitted away from the central nervous system to the effector organ to having the response. Then we will move what is the synapses. Normally, the central nervous system is made up of many billion number of nerve cells, and these have links with many others through synapses. Normally, synapses is actually a gap between two nerve cells. Normally, electrical impulses pass along the neuron, but they do not cross the gap. Instead of that, the nerve endings secrete chemicals called neurotransmitters. Then this chemical diffuses across the gap and attaches to the membrane of the second neuron. Then it will start new impulses in the second cell. Then we will look at the pathway of transferring impulses through synapses. First, the impulses arrive down the axon of the first neuron. Then the chemicals called neurotransmitters diffuses across the synapse. After that, neurotransmitters attach to the membrane of the second neuron. Then impulses are started in the second neuron. So after the impulse is transferred to the second neuron, the neurotransmitters broken down by the enzyme from the second neuron. Okay, then we will move what do you mean by the reflex action in a body. So when think about the reflex action, it's a rapid automatic response to a stimulus. So this action normally it's a voluntary actions. Why we call that the voluntary actions? Because these impulses are not started by the brain. So normally the reflex action is used to protect the body in an urgent case. So when think about the example for the reflex action, assume that you have touched your hand in a hot pot, and what you done is that in that place you just remove your hand away at once. So that's the example for the reflex actions. So when think about the nerve pathway of the reflex actions, we call it as reflex arc. So then we will look at how this reflex arc is occurred. In the reflex arc, the receptor generates impulses in sensory neuron according to the stimulus. The impulses enter the central nervous system through a part of the spinal nerve called dorsal root. In the spinal cord, the sensory neurons connects with the short relay neurons by synapses. Then these relay neurons in turn connect with the motor neurons. After that, these motor neurons emerge from the spinal cord through the ventral root, and after that these will send impulses back to the effector, which is called muscles and the glands. So when think about the brain in a reflex arc, so normally the brain is unaware of what is going on spinal cord, but in the spinal cord the reflex arc neurons also form synapses with nerve cells which leads to and from the brain. So the brain therefore receives information, and that's how the pain is felt in the body. So then we will move to our next topic, the brain. So as you can see in the picture, there are many parts in the brain, like we call cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla, pituitary gland and hypothalamus. So then we will look at those parts separately. The first one is cerebrum. When you think about the cerebrum, it's the largest part of the brain. So it is made of two cerebral hemispheres. Normally, the cerebrum is the source of all our conscious thoughts. So it has an outer layer called cerebral cortex, and also it has many folds all over its surface. So when think about the functions of the cerebrum, so normally first one is it contains sensory areas. From that it receives and processes information from all our sense organs. Also the second one, it has contains motor areas. In these motor areas, normally all the voluntary actions originated from these motor areas. And also it contains the area for origin of higher activities. Normally example for these higher activities are memory, reasoning, emotions and the personality. So then we'll move to the next part of the brain, which is called cerebellum. So normally cerebellum is located in behind the cerebrum. This region is concerned with the coordinating the contraction of set of muscles, and also it maintains the balance. So when think about the example for the maintaining the balance, which coordinates by the cerebellum are running, riding a bicycle. So then we will move to the next part, which is called medulla or the brain stem. So underneath the cerebrum, the connecting the spinal cord with the rest of the brain, there is a part called brain stem or medulla. Normally, this part is controls the basic body activities like heartbeat and breathing. So then we will move to the next parts, which is called pituitary gland. Normally the pituitary gland is located at the base of the brain, just below the part of the brain which is called the hypothalamus. The pituitary glands normally secretes a number of chemical messengers called hormones under the influence of this hypothalamus. So these are the informations regarding the central nervous system. So this is the end of the presentation, and thank you very much for listening to the presentation.